So I'm going to be talking about personas, and at the end, hopefully we're going to find out if they're a valuable tool or a complete waste of time. But let's start with finding out what they are. Personas are fictional yet realistic descriptions of your target or typical users of your product or service. They've been around for a while. I guess most of you have come across them at some point in time. They were invented in the late 90s by Alan Cooper. He was an American software engineer, and he wanted to build the software product around the user needs rather than just what the developers thought the users might need. So ever since, they've been loved, but they've also been hated, especially among UX'ers. Personally, I would say I actually love them. They are a great way of communicating and bringing to life the research you've done, and also because they focus the discussions with stakeholders around the user needs rather than opinions. Sorry. But yeah, I do understand why people hate them. It's because often they fail. They become these zombie personas that just lurks around the organization but never really gets put to use. So today I'll be walking through some common fails, so hopefully you'll avoid them in your future projects. Sorry. First of all, fail number one, you talk about different things. So maybe you've talked about creating personas in your organization, you've got your team together, everything is good, and you start creating these personas. But maybe you haven't realized that people are actually talking about different things. So marketing might want to use them for their next social media campaign. Sales want to see how they can turn leads into sales. The developers want to see which features they want to create. Content producers want to see to know who they're writing for, whereas the product manager might just want to get everyone on the same page in terms of who the users are and what their needs are. So yeah, you kind of set yourself up for failure if you don't, if you just assume that everyone has the same idea of what they are and how you can use them. So even though it sounds a bit trivial, just make sure that everyone has the same idea of what they are, how you're going to create them, and especially what you're going to use them for in the end. Fail number two, you think personas can solve all of your problems. And it would be great if there was some kind of like magical unicorns spreading sprinkles all over it. And if they alone could answer all of your research questions, and if all the different departments' need would be met by just these 4 personas that you've got. Often that's not the case. So remember, and Donna talked about it as well, you can complement the personas with other artifacts. So they're great for some things, like really bring that the user's attitudes and goals to life, and defining the user's problem space. What problems do they have that's relevant to your product or service? But yeah, adding other artifacts might be a good idea, and we have some that we tend to use. I've brought a few examples. So this is the forces diagram. It's a model of behavior change, and it's based on the jobs to be done framework, and I know some of you in the room knows it already. So this is a model of behavior change, and it looks at the factors that are driving people to change behaviors. So it could be purchasing a product or shifting from one product to another. And this diagram could easily be kind of an add-on for each persona, highlighting how this persona would go about changing their current habits. Another thing that you could complement your personas with is the customer journey map. Personas are quite good at giving that snapshot of users, but they're not good in conveying the idea of the end-to-end experience. So, as Donna talked about as well, and Clarissa, we often incorporate personas into the journey maps to communicate that process they go through. User requirements or user stories. We often use the research data we have to create this artifact as well. It's kind of a process of translating the user needs into more specific content or product-specific stories. And for these things, often the research you've done can be repurposed into different things. So you don't have to go out and do a whole new research process. Often you can just, dig into your data again and create these things sometimes. Fail number 3, you don't do the research. So your personas are only as good as the research that went into them. They're not hypothetical. I don't think they should be hypothetical. Sometimes they will be because you have to create something quickly. But they really shouldn't be. They should be based on conversations and interaction with real users, engagement with real users. So we can't recommend downloading one of those great templates from Google. I'm sure I've done it quite a lot, and it is tempting, but don't do it, and don't just write all the stuff that is written out in them, like goals and frustrations and stuff like that. Don't jump into just filling them out. Instead, try to first of all consider which insights about the users, your customers, that you actually need for your product. So this is kind of a guide that we use, and it's basically just elements that you potentially would want to know about your users. So depending on the project that you're working on, you can pick and choose between these elements, and then build your interview guide based on these elements. Make sure that you cover these things when you do the research. Fail number 4, you do the wrong kind of research. So to me, personas is not about the end product, it's about learning about your users. It's about getting a sense of their attitudes, their reasoning, their motivations, and getting that feeling of what excites them and what drives them in their lives So trying to get those deep insights. Often we have various research data. We've based personas on focus groups and surveys and email inquiry analysis and listening in on customer calls. You can use all this data. We found that by far interviewing users in depth and observing them is the best method. Fail number 5. It's not really a fail, it's more a struggle, but it did really. I had to put it into the same concept. So the struggle you face when you have to turn your research data into meaningful persona, it can be a bit terrifying doing this. You've got too much data and it's overwhelming. So just be aware that because it's overwhelming doesn't mean that you can get through it. Don't jump to, don't do shortcuts here. Don't, because there's so much data, then you focus on the wrong things. Like focusing on your persona's age, what picture you're going to put in, what colors they're going to have, which design they're going to have. It comes later down the line. So go through the process. Start with the research data, be the scientist, but also be the artist, the storyteller. So you have to go back and forth from your research and then into those kind of more like intuitive ways of like getting the story across. Fail number 6, Dan just talked about it, so I won't repeat everything he said. But yeah, the more you involve people, the better chances of getting good results in the end, and the better chances of good use of the personas afterwards. Yeah, I've got a good example of this. Recently I worked with Genius Solutions. They are a medical software company, and they're here in the room as well. I had the pleasure of guiding them through the persona creation process. And they got a diverse team together. They managed to get product management, UX designers, customer-facing staff, marketing, head of development in the room to do this project, to learn about their users. So although I guided them in the process, they actually did the interviews themselves. They did, I think it was 16 interviews or so with users, and wrote notes. And through sense-making workshops, they pulled out findings and populated these different elements or insights about the users they had decided beforehand that they needed to know about the users. So from the guide I showed you earlier. So these were things like their goals, their frustrations, their attitudes towards risks, and so forth. So, so through this workshop, they pulled out the findings, then they found common traits and differences between their users and built the personas based on that. So, did a rough draft of the personas. I think in this process, the learning was by far the important part of it, not so much the personas they created in the end, that the object itself. So the developer got a plan of how to use it, so that's just a great job they did. Well done, Genie. Fail number 7, you take them too literal. So once you put your personas to use, don't take them too literal. It's kind of a balance because you want enough details in your persona to make them come alive, but at the same time, when you use them, you don't want to focus on the specifics in it. That the girl, it's a girl and she's 22 years old, she has a dog, if it's unrelated to the solution you're building. Often, personas convey a greater idea of, for instance, being unfamiliar to a new country. Maybe your persona is from Japan. So it's the unfamiliarity that you have to focus on, not that she's from Japan, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, loosen up and see the bigger picture and make sure that the whole team knows this when they're putting them to use. So, trap number 8, I've been there. You don't know how to put them to use. So, let's put them on the wall. Let's create some stickers and put them on the wall so when everyone walks past, they kind of see the personas. So, yeah. So, seeing is not enough. So, personas only work if you use them hands-on. And we like to use them in co-creation sessions, as Dan talked about, getting everyone on the same page in terms of knowing what the user's goals are and designing for that. We use them in design sessions where they're good for designing for a specific person rather than a generic user. And also when recruiting for tests, kind of gives you an idea of who you're going to recruit when you're testing your solution. Which brings me to the last fail. You don't test. So you've done your personas and you've begun using them to craft new features or solutions, But remember that your designs are still not validated. You need to go out and test them with real users. You don't really know how they'll be performing with real users, even though they're basically based on real users' needs when you first start the process. So yeah, always test your designs. I've come to the end, so let's get back to the initial question. Are personas a valuable tool, or are they a waste of time? I would say it depends. Are you prepared to form a shared idea of what personas are and how you'll use them when you first start your project? Are you prepared to use additional artifacts if you need to leave the desk and actually talk to users? To be the scientist, but also be the storyteller. To get people in the organization involved. To use them in hands-on sessions, not just to look at. And finally, to test your solutions. Then I would say, yes, they will be a valuable tool for you.